Hello, and welcome to Ville first webinar in our 30th anniversary webinar series. This webinar is titled Finding a Home in the City, the Beginnings of Ville. I will be the moderator for the webinar today. My name is Star Gale, and I'm the Executive Director here at Ville. I'd like to start out with an outline of the webinar. Before we get into the main part of the webinar, which is going to be our panel discussion, I'm going to go through a brief presentation on deinstitutionalization in Montreal to provide the social context of Ville's beginning. Then we're going to get into a panel discussion on the founding of Ville with our guest speakers Bob Bassett, Laura Loewen, Maureen Ramsey, and Marjorie Sharp. We're then going to watch a video, The Restorative Power of Community, Ville and the Ville Network. And then we're going to have another brief panel discussion between myself and Jerome Kierans to talk about what life is like at L'Abri today. And then we'll have a question period. So I'd like to start by giving some of the context of L'Abri. So deinstitutionalization, which is a movement that people recognize in North America, in Canada it began in the 1960s, and it was defined as the process of discharging chronic mental health patients into the community in order for them to receive care from community mental health services. And before the 1960s, deinstitutionalization had been talked about. It had been an idea since the 1910s, but for the most part, the mental health services here in Montreal were provided through institutions, and these were usually religiously affiliated. But because of the overcrowding and the high ratio of patients in institutions, it wasn't an ideal setting to provide care, and the community supports for people to be deinstitutionalized just didn't exist. In the 1960s here in Quebec, there was the Quiet Revolution, which meant there was economic and political changes, and there was also new developments in medicine and mental health care that opened up possibilities where medication started to help people who had been managing chronic mental health illnesses keep some of the symptoms that were more problematic for them at bay, and they could function better socially. There was also a book that came out where a former patient of one of the hospitals spoke about his experiences, and this inspired what was called the Bedard Commission in 1962 that recommended kind of sprawling changes to mental health care here in Quebec. So this meant that in the 1970s and 80s, in deinstitutionalization in Montreal, many people were discharged to the community, but there was still a lack of community supports. And some of the big barriers to people who were experiencing deinstitutionalization, accessing stable housing, was stigma about mental illness, financial burdens for individuals who are having a hard time going into the job market or hadn't been working because they've been institutionalized. Language, certainly for any people that were Anglophone Montrealers, when most of the services that were being provided were Francophone. And there just wasn't supports, again, that existed at that point in the 70s and 80s to facilitate community rehabilitation. So in 1991, a community-based organization came to exist called Ville. That's when it was incorporated. And it came from that social context of wanting to meet the needs that they were seeing then, that they'd observed then, certainly up into the late 80s when the conversation was happening, watching many people in their communities who were trying to navigate deinstitutionalization and facing all of those barriers to housing and community rehabilitation. And Ville started renting and furnishing 3-bedroom apartments, and planning a way to connect it also to a volunteer community that supported the independent living of the residents there. was supported largely by different faith-based communities, which you're going to hear about when we go into the panel discussion. And every year from 1991 on, they opened approximately one apartment per year. In 2001, with 10 apartments now, Le Brionville received a Government of Canada grant to set up a guidebook with the goal of disseminating the model to other groups. And in 2003, they received a grant from the McConnell Foundation supporting this dissemination project. And 3 other organizations that followed the Le Brionville model were opened: Les Toits de Mille, Our Harbor, and Ancura. Les Toits de Mille and Our Harbor on the South Shore here in Quebec, in Montreal, and Ancura in Ottawa. And today, we have a large body of volunteers that serve as members of the board, contributing to the organization's governance and or help to build bridges to the wider community. And they participate with residents in activities, and they have shared interests that they support through informal get-togethers. We have 2 coordinators that visit the apartments weekly, and individuals as they might need, and also support the relationships between the volunteers and the residents. And then we have residents who are also our volunteers that participate on the board, raise and manage their own activity funds, and they also support one another through cooperative shared living. We will now move on to the panel discussion, which is the main portion of the webinar. And we are so pleased to welcome our 4 panel speakers. We welcome Maureen Ramsey, who is one of Labrie's first apartment coordinators and is still connected to us as a friend, but also as a volunteer at one of our sister organizations, Ancura. Bob Bassett, who is a founding member, apartment volunteer, as well as having sat on many of Labrie's committees over the years, particularly supporting us in fundraising. Laura Loewen. Laura is a founding member, past president, and a dear friend of Labrie who lives on the West Coast now. And Marjorie Sharp, another founding member of Labrie, past chair of the Interchurch Social Service Planning Committee, or ICSPC, and she remains a Labrie volunteer and committee member today. So I'd like to start the panel discussion by reading an excerpt from one of Eleanor Beatty's many presentation to churches in the 90s. Eleanor Beatty is one of the founders of Le Brionville. In 1988, at a meeting of the Interchurch Social Service Planning Committee downtown, we decided to study how we could help meet the needs of people diagnosed with mental illness. A model was founded on the West Island, where their citizens advocacy group had founded CARE, Create a Rehabilitative Environment. Can you tell us a little bit about Eleanor and ICSPC, the abbreviated term for that, or the Interchurch Social Service Planning Committee and their role in Labrie's development? And maybe Marjorie, you could let us know a little bit about that.
Okay, ICSPC actually went back before. I have to give you a little history before the setting up of Labrie, because it was set up from Christchurch Cathedral, who was seeing a problem with women on the street. And we were tasked, the small group of us were tasked with the project of doing something about it or thinking what we could do about it. And we decided that alone we really couldn't do anything. So we wrote a letter to all the churches in the downtown area, inviting them to a meeting to discuss it. They all came. And out of that, we formed this committee, the Interchurch Social Service Planning Committee. Well, it didn't have a name at that point. It didn't have a name for a while. It was the Gazette that gave it the name. Anyway, and out of that came an organization, a women's shelter called Auberge Madeleine. Okay. Having got Auberge Madeleine set up, some of the members from the ICSPC committee stayed with Auberge Madeleine, but the rest of us, so what do we do now? And that's where Eleanor's story comes in, because somebody came to us with the suggestion of helping people with mental health and their homes. And so we thought about it, the feasibility, and decided it was a project that we could work on. And I did, from that point, work on the incorporation of it. That is, setting it up as a legal entity under Part 3 of the Quebec Companies Act. Because you're not going to get any money from anybody if you're not incorporated. You have to become a person, a legal person in Quebec, legal terms. So the first issue was we had to find a name, and I have no recollection at all of how we came up with the name of L'Abri en Ville. Maybe Eleanor in her notes.
Well, I think it was a topic before in the conversation, because the suggestion that Eleanor had originally had, I believe it was L'Abri en Rose.
La Vie en Rose.
Yes.
Yes.
Really?
We nixed that because we said it sounded too much like the lingerie shop. That was, and that's then how, and then we came into L'Abri en Ville. Mm-hmm.
Yes, well, having decided on a name, then I applied for the charter.
Okay.
And we got the charter, and so we created this legal person, L'Abri en Ville. And we had a meeting of interested members, and there was a meeting again. And at that meeting, they elected the president, vice president, and treasurer.
Mm-hmm.
And I handed them the charter, and they were on their way. At that point, I stepped out. But we had some very interesting meetings. And we had them at St. James the Apostle, mostly in a sort of side room at the Church of St. James the Apostle. And St. James had a cat. And the cat came to the meetings. I don't know if you remember that. Was anybody else on the committee at that time? Maybe not.
I think Laura and Bob, were you both on the committees at that time?
Well,
I remember one or two meetings with XP, but Marjorie was in it before I was, and then
and I think I was on it before you were as well, Bob. I don't remember the cat.
Well, I do, because he used to jump on the table. It was a part of the institution of L'Abri anyway. Yes, well, that's where we had the meetings mostly at St. James the Apostle. Meeting of XPIC, and the Gazette wrote an article about the committee and what it was doing, and gave it the name, because it didn't have a name until then.
Can I ask what, and maybe I'll start with you, Maureen, because I know it wasn't long after that you joined, and we can go through everybody, but what drew you to this project? What was happening for you at the time that you heard about this new project and you wanted to get involved?
Yeah, well, I had gone actually at a fairly on age back to McGill to study social work. And it was just at the point where I was graduating that the person who was the director of the student field placement called me in. It was practically the end of the exams, and said this organization, a new little organization called L'Abri en Ville, was looking for a coordinator. And then she explained about what L'Abri was. And I looked at that and I said, wow, what a wonderful idea. I like this. I would really like to enthusiastically be part of this, you know. And previous to going back to McGill, I guess I had been a volunteer and sort of organizing a lunch drop-in center in Verdun where I was living. And many of the people who came into that center, and we were open for many hours. So it was lunch, but it was a sitting around chatting, and there was a piano. A few people played the piano. Anyway, many of the people who came were people who were, part of the deinstitution. I want to say that word, get it out, deinstitutionalization. Who had been associated maybe with the Douglas Hospital. So I really spent over a couple of years really getting to know people, and it was really nice. And so I could see how this kind of project like Le Abri had would really be very helpful, for housing, for support, for friendship. Yeah, it was, I was really, really drawn to it. So that was it. And barely finished the exam. I didn't even have a summer holiday that year and started.
and it was right to open
You made up for it.
The next part. And Laura, what about you? What brought you attracted you to this project?
Well, I moved to Montreal to be the pastor at the Mennonite Fellowship of Montreal. And that congregation, it's a small congregation, so they knew that they didn't really have full time. And so they wanted me to be involved in the community in some way. So, and I think I heard about ICSPIC, I think it was through some people at Christchurch Cathedral, if I'm correct, if I remember. And so then I checked it out, and that's how I became involved there. And, maybe I just want to add, as far as the launch of Le Abri, I remember that committee, that meeting we had, a couple of meetings, we were talking about the idea, and all of a sudden, almost at the end of the meeting, Eleanor said, okay, let's do it. And we all kind of stopped. And then, okay, now what? And so I think Eleanor was the sort of brave and fearless leader. And I think she's the one that really was the passion behind it. And I don't know if it would have gotten going had it not been for her.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree.
That brings me actually to another excerpt from Eleanor's writings. So she wrote, "Our main distinguishing feature is that we are not a temporary respite, a transitional residence, or a halfway house." And that remains one of the most unique features of Le Abri. And could you tell us a little bit more about how that came to be? The idea that there's, 3 residents per apartment, and maybe a little bit about the idea of sponsors or advocates, but that this was a home, this was a permanent home. And I'll leave that open, whoever wants to kind of maybe jump in and tell a little bit more about that.
Well, I think before it came into being, people or residents or people who were with mental issues, if they left their group home or something, if I understand it correctly, and we had to go to the hospital, they lost their place. And we did not want anyone to lose their place just because they might need some more additional help. So that's why we had to raise money to make sure that there was some money to cover the rent or whatever, so that they had a home to go to. And it was a forever place for them, or as long as they wanted it. And then I think he also, 3 instead of 2. I mean, it was the financial part of it. It made it easier for them to live within the means. But also, I think if one person didn't feel so good, the other 2 still had each other to pull the third one up and also to support one another.
And can you maybe tell me a little bit about the opening of those apartments? What did it look like when an apartment opened up in the early days? How was an apartment getting set up and furnished, and what was that like?
Well, if I may say, so my wife Mary was very involved in the first apartment. location, choice, and so on. And it was in Ville, and the concept of Abri was to have different apartments in different parts of the city, not to have everybody in one building and such. So this way was a real home for people. And so it's permanent housing for them. And it's my, I speaking as a father, my daughter's been with me on Ville for year one. It's been wonderful, satisfying for us to know that we're no longer able to cope. Ville will be there, and she'll have a permanent. The residents all have a permanent residence. If they're sick, they can come back again, and so on and so forth. So it's permanent help for them, and they're happy in the apartments. It works very, very well together. They're a team effort.
I remember the opening of that apartment when there was a ceremony to bless the apartment. Do you remember that, Bob? When the minister, I think it was the monk apartment, first apartment, and there was a ceremony there at the apartment to bless the apartment with the, I've forgotten his name, the minister from St. Andrew and St. Paul, and the Reverend Joan Shanks from Christchurch Cathedral. They blessed the apartment, and we all stood and held lighted candles.
Yeah, but they did that. We did that at least. I think that happened at every apartment opening.
But
and
this
I think it was
the
just
one. Yeah, this was the first one because I didn't attend any of the others.
Yeah, no, we had that for every opening of those apartments, which I think
started there.
Yeah, yes. Was set a good environment, you know, just to made it a nice space. I would say for the first apartment, it was the board members who really set it up, and I can remember cleaning and painting and trying to get furniture together. But I think after the first one, we kind of said, "Oh, there's Maureen," and and so I think she was put more in charge of it, as well as the volunteers. Correct, Maureen?
Yeah. Well, when I came in, yes, it was just about the opening of the second one. So I was very involved with the moving in process. But I believe even at that time, some of the board members were in there doing cleaning or getting it all set up too. Yeah, it was, even maybe the third, you know, before we got enough people and the board expanded a little bit, and so then when Marianne came on board, we really did more of that. Yeah, it was fun. It was really
it was.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do a little bit of fast forwarding to 1995. And, you know, I think the fifth apartment is open. And I wanted to ask a little bit about a couple things. So I wanted to ask a little bit, like, it seemed like there was quite a bit of excitement around, like, this is working. You know, we started this idea, we got one apartment open, but this is really working. And there was more involvement from volunteers. And it looks like part of the thing was that there was also a focus on stigma, and you know, addressing stigma and normalizing mental illness became part of the relationship that the people who were involved in setting up L'Abri were kind of focusing on. Could you tell me maybe a little bit about that?
Well, I think one of the things that helped would have been the orientation sessions. And I know that a number of volunteers, and I know I kind of sort of approached, you know, not a little bit of fear and trembling, not having worked with that segment of population prior to that. And I think that as we began to know the residents, they were just people like us. And I remember hearing volunteers said, we went in as volunteers, we came out as friends.
Yeah.
And I think that helps to take the stigma away. It's just, we all have issues. And this was just with a particular issue that of people that needed a little extra support.
Yeah, at that around that time was Jim Tremaine and Kiki were part of the organization of L'Abri too. And I know Jim was on a committee at the Douglas Hospital that was really trying to address stigma in a bigger way. And as far as that goes, I think the way we evolved too, it was like a really community sort of with the volunteers who might have had, hesitations or whatever, but it was absorbing, I think, our residents into the various church communities as well. They would attend dinners or flea markets or whatever. So it really normalized everybody. Yeah, and everybody was together in it, and there wasn't. I think for people who might not have had contact and had fears or whatever, they disappear when you interact with somebody on a friendly basis. Just disappear, and they're another person that your friend that you're with. So I think doing it, having the community expand from L'Abri to the faith communities as well was part of that dissolving of stigmas process.
I think another thing that may have helped is was the interaction that began among the residents to start their own newsletter, or and they helped they had their own fundraisers for their picnics and for their camp in the summer, and I think that too helps the residents to feel they're normal. They do fundraiser, they go to camp, they go to the lakes, they have outings, and we need to raise some money to go there. That's what we all do.
Well, also just an integral part of making this model work, because so much of it comes down to cooperative shared living and them supporting one another.
The Christmas card project too, all the faith communities supported that full tilt. Yeah, we never had any trouble selling Christmas cards because they were supported. It was great.
Can I jump a little bit on the financial part of the beginnings?
Yeah.
People contacted me. We had one part-time coordinator, but then as the departments grew, we had to get more financial resources, and so we've had a lot of support. We've got a list of some companies, a great list of individuals. People talk to their doctors and lawyers and so on. And Eleanor Biddy and I went through some books with different charities that have different objectives. So we targeted those places. We got a lot of support from that, and some corporate support. And so financially, we've done very well over the years. We're financially solvent and solid, and no problem.
And I think too, you when we had all spoken before, you guys had all mentioned what a kind of tenacious fundraiser and kind of advocate for L'Abri Eleanor was always. She remains. She's not just a founder. I wanted to read one more kind of quote, because I want to make sure that we can get to the other stuff, but I think that this is another really important part. And that was inherent in the strength of our model is that the circle of community that supports our residents is small enough for intimacy and large enough for variety. And I think that statement, it was kind of leading up to the decision that was made that L'Abri would stop at 10 apartments. And I know not everybody was maybe there at that time or when it led into dissemination, but I know some of you were. So I was hoping you could maybe tell us a little bit about that.
That again was Eleanor's wisdom, I think, of starting it. And it was helped very much at that time when we decided to go this way by Audrey Bean, who had connections with the McConnell Foundation. And so fortunately, she was able to engineer another grant from the McConnell Foundation that allowed us to hire another person to work on that. And I forget how many we were now, but it allowed me to spend some time on that too, and still have the other coordinators. And the guidebook, which I still think is an excellent guidebook, that was a way to have other interested groups have some kind of not have to go through all the process Labrie founders did to figure out the process. It was sort of laid out. And people, as I recall, the first other groups like on the South Shore that were interested, like Les Trois de Mille, it was parents who really picked up on the idea and then talked to their groups. And not only parents, but a couple of times it was. The final one was out of the whole Montreal area was when the last one we decided to try to start was in Ottawa, of course, and it turned out to be Ancora, which really is still adding. We have 7, Ancora has 7 homes now, and so we're still not at that 10 mark, but that's the process,
Well, I just wanted to share quickly what people are seeing on the screen is kind of what the system of system of Labrie is, where you have at the heart of it the 30 residents and 10 3-bedroom apartments that are supported by 3 coordinators. And then you have about 60 volunteers or advocates, they were called in the beginning, your board of directors, and then you have the radiating out, you have the other levels of support, which is your social support, and material support, and so on. And even though it mentions Montreal, this is a model that's been able to be duplicated in other communities as well. And Laura, I'd like to let you finish what you were going to say, and then I'll wrap it up by asking you guys for your final thoughts. Go ahead, Laura.
I just want to add to this not going larger than 10. I think that another reason for doing that is that we didn't want to become sort of an institution or become so bureaucratic that we didn't know each other, and it was more like it wanted more of a family feeling. Mm-hmm. And I think the larger one gets, the more difficult that can be.
Okay. Yeah. Could I add to that, Laura? Because
sure.
That's another fact that really attracted me to this whole idea, was that it was really meant to be an alternative to the institutionalized settings for group homes and hospital associated supported living. It could be different. It was a community support. And there's just one story that really impressed me in the first couple of years I was coordinating. I think it was an OT worker from the Douglas Hospital who was following one of our residents at the time, who said to me, "I would just love to take so-and-so home and have a meal, but I can't. I'd be fired." We could. As a coordinator, we all of us have had residents to our home and shared in this really way that you can't do within the institutionalized setting. So that's a very, I feel, an important part.
Absolutely. And I think I wanted to, one of the things I wanted to do was also kind of get your ideas or your thoughts about any lasting experiences or memories. But I think what we might do, because I'm watching the clock and I know we could keep going, I'm going to go into the next part, which is showing the video, and we'll wrap it up. And then maybe we can revisit some of those final thoughts during the question period, which will start at 5:30. So thank you all so much. And just for everybody, so everybody knows, the panelists aren't going anywhere. They're going to stick around so that they can chat and answer your questions at 5:30. In 2012, L'Abri received an award from the Mental Health Commission of Canada for community capacity. And at that time, there was a video made of L'Abri that featured residents and volunteers. And I think that it might be a good way to kind of bring together what we've shared so far. So I'm going to share that with you now.
I was living by myself in a one-room apartment, but I was starting to feel more and more isolated, which pretty much progressed to despair. Pretty much what happened was I came to the point where I pretty much gave up.
It was so simple. It was just a question of creating community around an apartment of 3 people, and that's how we started.
What it has more than anybody else, which I find really, really encouraging and wonderful and worthwhile, is that it really deals with a two-way street for people. When you start meeting the guys and the ladies in the apartments and stuff like that, you realize that what everybody's after is a community.
Before I came here, I was living in a group home in LaSalle. And they did everything for us. They did the cooking, they did the cleaning, they did the washing. Everything was done for us. They were caring, but L'Abri has an ethic of humanism.
I really think that was the biggest lesson I learned from L'Abri, that life was actually worth living. Whereas before I thought, I just can't make it in this world.
That is the beauty of the program, that it enhances and cultivates what's already present in the community. We don't transport it to Montreal or give it a Montreal flavor. We in the South Shore have a South Shore flavor, and culture and everything else that's very, very essential.
And I think now I'm going to ask Jerome to join me, Jerome Kierans. I'm going to ask him to introduce himself as well. And Jerome and I are going to wrap this up with a little bit of a conversation that'll give everybody an idea of where L'Abri's at today. So welcome.
Okay, my name is Jerome Kierans, and I have been a resident of L'Abri en Ville for 25 years. I've been working as a volunteer for the same period of time at the Jewish General Hospital, CIUS Centre West, in the payroll department. I've been a board member of L'Abri en Ville on several occasions, and I've been involved in committee work. Although I'm not a board member now, I am part of the organization of this webinar, celebrating L'Abri en Ville's 30th anniversary.
Thanks, Jerome. And I'm just so everybody knows, in case I haven't done it already, my name is Star Gale, and I'm the executive director here at Labrie. I came to Labrie 10 years ago as a stagiaire, and I've worked as a coordinator as well. And I'm really grateful to be here. And I mean, I am the executive director, so I might be a little bit biased, but I also love Labrie, and I've had a chance to participate with Labrie in so many different ways. So, Jerome, do you want to tell me and tell us a little bit about how you came to Labrie and when you came to Labrie? Because you were here almost pretty close to the beginning.
Right. Well, I first came to Ville from my own apartment in 1996 when my cousin told my mom about it. My cousin owned a duplex, which I was Ville apartment, and she knew Maureen Ramsey, whom you've already met, who later became the very first person I knew at Ville. I moved in with Mary and Leah with the help of Marianne Natrakis, who's with us today, and Richard Tobin, as well as a great number of residents who helped me unpack the moving van. I paid them all with egg salad sandwiches because I didn't have enough money to pay them anything else, any wood money.
And for me, like I said, I came to Labrie as a student in my second year of a stage at McGill, and Marianne at the time was actually my supervisor, who's here with us today. And I just remember one of the big things. First of all, there was lots of tea and cookies involved. So Labrie, back to what was said earlier about wanting to make sure that from the get-go, if a social worker was coming to the office, if somebody who was applying for housing was coming to the office, they were greeted and welcomed into the space in a way that any of the kind of anxieties or the fears that they might be coming back into a setting that they were unsure about was met with tea and cookies. And it was also just amazing to me because at that point, I'd never heard of indefinite supported housing. Almost all of the housing options I'd ever heard of, there was some point where the person had to graduate out of that program. There was some kind of time limit put on it. So that was another thing that I remember as a student just being amazed by. And maybe you want to tell us a little bit, Jerome, about Labrie.
Okay. Well, as Marianne knows, the first thing I ever did here at Ville was to quit a 12-year smoking habit, which I thought was a big achievement. I became a board of directors member within 1 year. And I would say that Ville more or less saved my life because I was really running out of money in my own apartment. Residents have come on camping trips annually to Camp Kincora, Camp Weardale, and now at Ile St. Bernard. Well, lots of us have attended these and we have a great time. We have a lot of fun. We swim, mountain climb, and enjoy other water sports. At Camp Kincora, we roughed it on hard cots and cabins, but at Ile St. Bernard, it's much more comfortable. We have gone on day trips to Ottawa and Quebec City, courtesy of foundations, and we go places with volunteers such as St. Anne de Bellevue and Mont St. Bruno, and we go with those with volunteers in my apartment, such as with Jim Cullen. We're never lonely and isolated, which is a problem with people like us sometimes. Ville is really somewhere I really love too, like you do, Star, and it's my home.
And I was wondering too, because you've been here for a while, how has Labrie changed in the years since you've been here?
Well, first of all, our offices were on a desk in the Catholic Community Services building, and then they became in an office there. Then we moved to the 3rd floor of the Queen Elizabeth Health Complex, then to the 6th, where the solarium is. And we rented the adjoining office, which became known as the AD room for applied dissemination, which we've mentioned already in the discussions. And after that, we purchased the building at 2352 Duvernay in Little Burgundy, and we own that building. So another change is we created a guidebook, which we mentioned before too, to show other groups how to create their own La Brilliant Villes on the South Shore and in Ottawa. This was to become the applied dissemination. We now have refurbished computers, Wi-Fi, and iPads in each one of our apartments, something we didn't always have. Arrangements which were made by L Abri, our old executive director, and by Star. The Star arranged for us to get the iPads. We now have an executive director position, which we did not always have.
Yeah.
That's a change as well.
Yeah, that's a definite, there's definitely been I remember when I came as a student, that's one thing, the evolution of the staff, and that there is a executive director position, and I've been able to be both a coordinator and an executive director. I'm the executive director now. But one thing that I would say is that it's always been, you know, like right now, I even feel L'Abri is in a time where it's constantly evolving. It's constantly evolving and changing, and kind of looking into itself to see, well, how do we figure out what's happening now and make it of a benefit to the community that we're participating in, or the community, not just locally, but the communities that we're connected to, like our sister organization. And I think that that's kind of bringing us to a close. I know, Jerome, we had a way that we thought would be nice to bring it to a close that brings in one of the residents that was there when you first moved in.
Right. Well, right. Okay. So go right on to that. This is my first roommate was a lady by the name of Mary Quinlan. And she wrote this wonderful poem, which she called La Brilliant Ville. So I'll read it to you right now. Think of a house with 3 bedrooms, a den, a kitchen with a fridge and stove, a bathroom and 2 balconies, a living room, a laundry room. Feel a home with 3 persons in it who read in the den, one watches the telejournal in the living room, another warms up ham and potatoes in the kitchen. It is my turn to clean the washroom. Our bedrooms are private and cozy. In them we read, write, relax, and sleep. Beginning to sound like your home? Anyone's home? Well, our home is even more special. It's in a Brilliant Ville. Volunteers build shelves for us, make curtains, balance budgets, move furniture, take us for groceries and to the movies. A board of directors raises funds from churches and synagogues, corporations, and individuals. So we can live modestly, do our laundry here, and go to summer camp. Coordinators meet with us and help us to better organize our lives. What else is our Brilliant Ville? Well, to us who've known the terror of emotional illness, who struggled with it for so many years, this Brilliant in Notre-Dame-de-Grâce is a peaceful home, blessed by God and the work of many human hands. With our hands and our hearts, we, in turn, give a very warm thank you to all of you who have made it possible. And this is by Mary Quinlan. And I just want to finish that off by saying, happy birthday, happy 30th birthday to La Brilliant Ville.
Thank you, Jerome.
Wonderful.
So for all of our, everybody that's an attendee that's muted themselves and that stopped their video, we're now just going to open it up for a question and answer period. So if you would like to, you could turn on your video, you could let us know and jump in and ask a question. Or the other thing that you could do is you can also, it depends on whether or not you're on an iPad or a computer, but you should have the option to raise your hand in the chat. So you could do that as well. And then we can ask you to come in and ask a question when you're ready. So I'll sort of leave it open. If anybody wants to jump in and ask a question, please do. Or even just say hi. I'm so happy to see so many people.
Can I just say that I thought that panel discussion was so interesting. And all of the comments, there was so much stuff that I didn't know, and all of the comments were really, really interesting. So I wanted to say thank you to all the participants.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cecily. Park ladies, did you guys want to ask a question?
No, yes, I'd like to say something, but we can't, we're not on the screen. We're not on the screen suddenly.
I can
Push it
do
like that.
there. Do you guys have an option to join?
Push it like that.
There, okay.
Hi, guys.
Hi. In particular, I would like to say to Maureen Ramsey, at least 19 years ago, you were my first entryway into Ville, and I was very hesitant, and I remember even coming from a group home, and the lady in charge of the group homes wanted me to give her a month's notice before I moved into L'Abri. And I was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to ask that? But I asked Maureen, and it all worked out. So I thank you so much, Maureen, because I'm still here and I'm still enjoying everything. And I thank everybody on the panel, and Star and Jerome and everybody. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been here.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really, that's lovely. It wasn't a question, but it was so lovely. Thank you so much. Nancy, I saw you had your hand up. Nancy, did you want to ask?
It wasn't really a question. I'm sorry. It was just to congratulate you all on putting this together. It was just
yes.
Experience. It was a trip down memory lane. It was, I'll be thinking about it as I go to sleep tonight, I'm sure.
We have other webinars that will be coming up too. The next one is going to be in May, and we'll be posting the dates and times for it soon. And that one's really going to focus on the relationship between the volunteers and the residents. So if we were light on some topics, some subjects in this one, it's because we have 3 more webinars coming. And Peta has
First of all, congratulations. This was wonderful. Happy birthday. We should all sing happy birthday at the end. But I was wondering, is there any way we can watch this again, or can we show it to anyone? It was fabulous.
Yes, I was a little bit late on the draw to hit record, but I did hit the record button. So it will be made available on the Ville website.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for joining.
Could I say a little word?
Yes, Jim. Hi.
I just want to especially remember Raymond Haché and Judy Stevens, who were with Jerome and I and others, Larry, in that apartment, and Dorothy Sims, of course, but especially Judy and Raymond, because they both represented, I think, the power of the community that you, the institute or the organization called forth. I remember the first time when I was in church and Maureen came, and she this delicate voice made a little invitation, and I couldn't resist, Maureen. You. Thanks.
Nice to see you, Jim.
Nice to see you, Maureen.
Yes, Jim, we all loved Judy and Ramon very, very much. We miss them greatly. We miss them dearly.
Yes.
Yes.
The other, if I could just make, you mentioned, for me, the first meeting I had when Dr. Fielding was there, he made a triangle, which I guess he's perhaps done again. But he said that in mental health work, You have medicines, you have psychology and psychotherapy and social support. And all of us, I think there were 6 or 7 of us who were starting to be volunteers, said, that's where we fit. And so that the role of Dr. Fielding was really, really important.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. And I see Jim Beatty, you have your hand raised. Are you able to unmute yourself?
Am I not unmuted?
Yes,
Okay.
there you are. Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's very moving for me to see this, to see the history of L'Abri and to be reminded of just what a wonderful person my sister was to work with many of you. Bob Bassett, I met last year, actually. I was at Bob's house with my sister, and I know Laura from her time at the MCC out here in Abbotsford. And I'm, of course, Eleanor's best friend in all of this was Audrey Bean. Eleanor never really quite recovered from Audrey's death. You may know that Eleanor is in a very serious state of dementia. And in fact, she's in the hospital at the Jewish General right now. The family is attempting to decide where she will spend the rest of her life. It's not an easy decision that we're making. I'm just reflecting on many of the things that were said today about why L'Abri was a success, and hearing the people who have been living at L'Abri. It really moves me to think of how much Eleanor loved you all. So I just wanted to say that if Eleanor could have been here, of course she would be. Another person who shared time with some of the residents was Leveda Pinder up in Ottawa. You would go to her house sometimes in the summertime and swim in her pool. And I was fortunate enough to be in Ottawa when Audrey Bean's brother and others started Ancora. Although I have a very distant relationship to the organization, my discussions with Eleanor were always very intense. And I'm so proud to see her recognized today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jim. Thank you very much.
Just wanted to say that it was really interesting. And I've been at L'Abri for 5 years, and I see that Jerome has been there for 25 years. I was really impressed to see that there's a continuation, you know, with L'Abri. So it gives hope, and it's good. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Joan.
This is really very well done and very touching and very beautiful. So a beautiful tribute to people who've worked very hard over many years. And I congratulate you all. I'm a newer one to the L'Abri family. I was wondering if there would be a need for another L'Abri en Ville, but not with that name, the same kind of organization in Montreal. It's a big city. How come because only 30 people can benefit from this at this time? Has anybody looked into that? Is there any need for it?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if, are you asking me, Joan, or are you, oh, there you are. Now I can see you.
Oh.
I know that in the discussions that I've been around for, it goes back to a little bit what was addressed about the idea that Eleanor had about it being bound in a community that was small enough that everybody could kind of know one another.
Yeah.
And that's when it functioned best. And I think it's also to be completely realistic, it's challenging these days to find apartments.
Of course, that's true.
Criteria that used to, where even with 3 people, it has that same level of affordability or that same appeal to it. But I think part of what this is, and at our 30th year, is, like I said, that process where Labrie always evolving and looking into itself and looking at the community and saying, but what do we do now? If we've gotten this well, and Labrie is still a very strong, healthy community because of all of the hard work of everybody here. So it's to look at that and say, how do we, again, just like Eleanor did, figure out what's working here and make it shareable? So I don't think Labrie is going to stop doing that anytime soon.
No. I suppose there is no one, if someone else would have that passion to start another organization like Labrie in Montreal, to have like a sister organization within a city. It wouldn't necessarily have to be Labrie doing it, but it would need someone to have the vision and the passion for it.
Yeah, that's what I had in mind. That's what I was thinking of. Not our Labrie expanding, but a whole other entity doing the same kind of function. Anyway,
I was thinking of the as you're, proposing how Labrie might go forward, and a conversation. I think once in our conversation you had mentioned it, but it was talked about many years ago. Was when our residents get older and how to accommodate people who this is their home for as long as they can stay, to be able to serve and continue addressing the needs of people when they get elderly. Anyway, that's I imagine something that's just a question, a continuation on some kind of a focus for the future, I guess.
Yeah, like what supports come into play for indefinite housing as the population ages. Yeah, that's definitely something Labrie's looked at before too. Yeah. I guess I'm going to be able, if I can cheat a little bit, because we were running a little bit over time when we were doing our panel discussion. There was a couple questions I didn't get a chance to ask our panelists. And it was a question that I wanted to pose to each of you. And that was, is there any really memorable moments that you take forward from Labrie? And is there any part of the spirit of Labrie that you're bringing forward into the work that you do now in your community, whether that's volunteering or anything? So if that's okay, I would like to ask that question, and I could start with you, Maureen.
Well, I guess my association with Ancora now is involving me, in a way. I'm out of Montreal, but certainly it's that experience with Labrie that has given me the enthusiasm and the commitment to continue this model, in Ottawa.
Thank you. And Laura?
Well, I'm presently, through my church, I am, it's a part-time job with seniors. And basically it's visiting, trying to be a friend and trying to connect them together in community. Mind you, now in COVID, it's not that simple, but to be a point of connection for them. And I think that's what Labrie has been where are the points of connection for for people regarding from what segment of society they come with. And so I think for me, even though I was on the board and maybe didn't have all that much on the day-to-day scale, I just think that whole connecting with the apartments with each other and how that has developed and the good spirit, I think that is wonderful.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today all the way from BC.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
And Bob?
Well, I guess I touched upon earlier, it's sort of an unseen part of Labrie, but a very important one in terms of parents of residents. It's so comforting to to me and my wife to know that it's permanent housing for our daughter and other people too who have children in L'Abri, to know that they will be part of the L'Abri community. We're gone. Well looked after, and then it'll keep on going for years to come, we hope. And it's really comforting to me as a parent, and I think my wife too, to know that our daughter and other people, I'm sure, feel the same way. It's permanent housing, not housing is the important word, but permanent residence for people. They don't have to leave; they can stay there for a long, long time. And stability is important.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. And Marjorie, what about you? Any memorable? I mean, you shared many with us, particularly the office cat.
Yes, I've been involved with quite a few different nonprofit organizations, and somebody asked me recently, well, what was the one that's most important and you feel proudest of? And I had to say L'Abri. And also the other thing, I had nothing to do with L'Abri for quite a long time until Lorraine invited me to become a volunteer at the Park Apartment. So it was, what are we supposed to be doing? Supporting them. But now I feel that the gals at the park are keeping an eye on me. They phone me up every now and again and tell me they're going to the movies. Would I like to come with them? I feel so honored. It's great. No, I'm really proud of L'Abri. I really am.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for joining us. And I think if I'll let it out there again. If anybody has any last questions or comments they'd like to make, and if not, I think yes, Jerome.
Okay, well, just to say, from the point of view of a resident, because we're residents, at L'Abri en Ville, we're given support and structure. There is a wonderful continuity of these, even though staff or executive directors may change. For example, Star has filled Cheryl's shoes very, very well, and so have Michelle, Shaka, and Leah as coordinators. And that I'd like to say that L'Abri en Ville has a culture of welcoming, which is first established by Eleanor. And that's what I'd like to say about that.
Thank you. And that's really true. In my and Jerome's conversation, we talked about how it's almost like L'Abri in a way has been a little bit, it's like a bit of a relay race. Sometimes residents decide they want to go live on their own, or volunteers move, or staff changes, but it has a way of bringing out the best in somebody. So for that time that they have that relay, when they run with that at L'Abri, it tends to bring out the best in them. And I'm so grateful to have been a part of it and remain a part of it. And I'm so happy to see everybody here this evening. And what a way to kick off the 30th anniversary. So we will be back. There will be webinars like this happening every month. Soon there should be a web page that will be just dedicated to the 30th anniversary on our website. And it'll have all the information there. And I think that's going to be it. So I'm going to wish everybody a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Star. Thank you so much for doing
this.
Yeah,
thank you.
Wonderful.
Star.
It was lovely.
Thank
you. Thank you. Happy New Year, Bashaka. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year today. And I will see you all hopefully soon, and enjoy your dinners. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye, Bob Bassett.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Star.
Bye.
Bye, you. Bye, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.